Good morning, Needham. Hi, students. My name is Hiba Senhaj, and I'm a project manager with Field First. Field First is a progressive political consulting firm that focuses on winning elections, passing legislation, and building movements from the bottom up. And so I'm here to talk about the importance of social media and traditional media to help elevate and advance your coalition's advocacy. So to start off, I think it's really important to understand the differences and distinctions between social media and traditional media. So traditional media reaches a maximum audience, whereas social media is a little bit more targeted based on the different tools that you use. And so social media is also more versatile. For some tools, you're able to make edits once published, or traditional media, once it's published, it's really set in stone. And then with social media, it's really quick, it's immediate, whereas with traditional media, it can be delayed due to, I think, press timings, and is a lot more of a long-term project compared to social media, which it can also be long-term, but also more so short-term. Social media is also very much a two-way conversation, and so you can really have direct conversation with folks in a public space, compared to traditional, which is more one way of just publishing information. I'm sure some press outlets have comments, but there really isn't that dialogue that you can get within social media posts comments. So it's really important, especially in this day and age, for your coalition or legislative campaign to have a social media presence. Social media is incredible for public education and also mobilization, whether that's long-term or also, I think, just immediate, quick pivots utilizing various call to actions. And so, as you all know, I think the three main popular social media platforms are Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And each platform has its own benefits and disadvantages. So for Twitter, you really need to be succinct. You have to really have quick to the point messaging, but it's also really incredible for increasing your engagement and mobilizing people with your specific call to actions. So just, I think, to give a quick example, so on the Driving Families Forward campaign, which is working to allow anyone, regardless of immigration status, to obtain a standard driver's license. And so after the historic House vote a few weeks ago, the coalition was able to quickly mobilize people to call and email their legislators, thanking them for their vote to help drown out the anti-immigrant voices. And so it was really quick. You just post a 250 character tweet with a cute little graphic, and you're able to generate thousands and hundreds of calls into legislators from across the state. And then moving on to Instagram. So I feel like Instagram is the youngest demographic. I think it's definitely because I think it's a lot more technologically advanced compared to Twitter and Facebook, because it has a lot of really great tools within the platform. And I personally think Instagram is incredible for visual public education, and it's probably the best platform for that. And then lastly is Facebook. So Facebook, I think, just tends to be a little bit more of an older conservative demographic, just because Facebook, I think, is the least technologically savvy, but it's also one of the oldest social media platforms. So I think people are just a lot more comfortable with it. It's also a really great place, I think, too, to also disseminate information compared, I think, to Twitter or Instagram users. So then I think switching now over to traditional media. Traditional media is, there's a lot of different facets that fall into it, but it's basically like the press. And the media is, I think, great in building up momentum or helping prolong the momentum. And like I mentioned earlier, compared to social media, where you think you just have a general audience, or a more, I think, general audience, where literally someone from Japan could probably see a post that I post right now in Boston. Media, I think, is definitely more targeted, and it's more area specific based, especially, I think, in key communities across the state. And so key tools to use in traditional media are just traditional news pieces that are that have a story or a specific part of your coalition to highlight op-eds. And so getting op-eds from key supporters or letter to editor campaigns that are as a direct result or an answer to op-eds or just traditional like news pieces. And then lastly is just editorial board endorsements. And so for a lot of newspapers, the editorial board can endorse specific causes or specific candidates. And it's really important to get that. The campaign was endorsed by the Boston Globe, I think 3 times. And then there was just like a study. I think the coalition did a really great job of just ensuring news pieces were published across the state. So you had pieces down in southeastern Mass and then the Cape, all the way up to the Merrimack Valley and all the way out to Western Mass. I think it's really important and to keep in mind geographic diversity as you, I think, really specifically focus on traditional media. I think things to highlight and I think useful ways to I think really activate your traditional media strategy, and that is with highlighting. So like I said before, traditional media can be really helpful in building momentum up to a peak, or it can help prolong a peak within your campaign. Because in legislative and also electoral campaigns, that there are always going to be peaks and valleys. So there's going to be times where your engagement and support is going to be really high, but then there are also going to be dips. And so it's really important to, I think, recognize those peaks and really do, I think, traditional media around those peaks or during those valleys. I think really trying to find a really like attractive like frame of your piece of bill to help build up the momentum back up to a peak. And so I think there's some really great ways are, I think, events. And so I think using the Driving Families Forward Coalition again. So the coalition did a series of virtual briefings that were highlighting important like endorsing stakeholders from faith, business, health, and law enforcement leaders. And it was a steady, so it was a weekly, every week there was a virtual briefing and there were press releases that were hit every single week, and it was tailored to messaging around each specific facet. So like the law enforcement messaging was very different than like the health and business, than the faith. And it was a consistent like month of January where there was probably around 3 to 4 press pieces from really all over the state. And that really built up momentum that led up to the historic House vote that happened a month after. And so I think that's a really great way that you can help build up momentum, but also just keep it steady. And so once you have that momentum, it's really, really important to keep it up. And pressure is so important, especially when it comes to legislative campaigns, because like I said, there are a lot of peaks and valleys. And so also how to move things along in the legislative process, it's really important to always implement pressure when necessary. So I think these are just, I think, some of the various ways that you can really utilize social media and also traditional media to, I think, really advance your specific legislative or electoral campaigns or issue-based campaigns. I think social media is a really versatile like tool, and I think every single day, and as social media continues to adapt, we're learning new and I think exciting and innovative ways to, I think, really push messaging across and pushing your advocacy across. And like always, traditional media I think is really, really important. I think it's such an institution, and I think it's really important that both strategies complement each other. You know, like if there's a traditional media piece that's out in support of your issue, you should be hiding it on social media and driving visibility and engagement towards that. And so while both are somewhat similar, but also very different, they both can complement each other in helping your advocacy move forward. Thank you all.